Hey, what's up guys? Today we're gonna look into the financial reports from Tsuburaya Productions and Bandai to answer why Ultraman Trigger was a commercial success. Now before we go on, remember that I am the Bias Pixel and I am not a business expert, so please take everything that I say with a grain of salt. Also, let me know in the comments if I misinterpret any information or get anything wrong. Anyways, let's get started. First of all, we need to establish whether our premise is even correct or not. I understand that the show wasn't well received by many fans. It was so notorious that one of my friends who doesn't even watch Tokusatsu asked me about how bad the show was. Also, if I go search Ultraman Trigger review on YouTube, the first video to pop up is Ultraman Trigger, Was It Really That Bad? By Event Godzilla. And so, you might be wondering how a show that was badly received can be a commercial success. But I have some data to back up this claim. If you go to the website for Tsuburaya Fields Holdings, which is the parent company of Tsuburaya Productions, then you can download some of the financial information for free. I put the link down in the description, so check it out if you're interested. In here, there's a medium-term management plan that was released on May 11th, 2022. This resource contains data that they gathered from April 2021 to March 2022. If you look at page 5 titled FY, which stands for Fiscal Year or Tax Year 2021, Trends and TPC or Tsuburaya Productions Company, MD, which stands for Merchandise, License Revenues, you can tell that Tsuburaya Productions made a significant jump in revenue compared to the previous year. Now let's look at the sales made by Bandai, who have exclusive rights for selling Ultraman toys in Japan. In their financial highlights, they have a table that lists the sales for each IP. I've made a simple graph to show you how Ultraman toys have been sold in Japan and overseas since 2016. As you can tell, there's a jump in sales from 2021 to 2022. From these two pieces of information, hopefully you get the picture that Ultraman Trigger was a commercial success. Of course, you can definitely argue that Trigger wasn't the only contributing factor, considering that a very successful movie came out in the same year, which I'll go into later in this video. But I think it's safe to say that Ultraman Trigger was the biggest contributor to the franchise's success, considering that it was the newest mainline Ultraman series and plethora of merchandise was released for it. Now that we got our premise established, let's look into why this happened. I think the biggest reason is the popularity of the Ultraman series in Asia. If we go back to page 5 of the medium-term management plan of Tsuburaya Productions, we can see that there was a bigger growth of revenue outside of Japan, with the overseas revenue increasing by 117.5%, while it was 94.2% increase within Japan. This is also the case for Bandai's toy sales, with the overseas revenue increasing by 195.35%, while it was 163.27% increase within Japan. But how can we tell that this increase in revenue comes from Asia? One of the obvious one is China, as you can see in the table from the medium-term management plan, that more than half of the overseas revenue comes from there. And Tsuburaya Productions' financial report that was released in February 2020, quote, "In particular, licensing operations in China, including toys, were favorable on the whole. In particular, sales of trading card games, which were launched in December 2018, are performing well, and we expect sales to continue going forward." Just so you know, based on what I've read, the trading card game mentioned here is exclusively sold in China and is produced by Zhejiang Kaiyou. And so, Tsuburaya Productions benefited from the license revenue, but I don't think Bandai did because it didn't seem like they're part of the card production in China. Anyways, for the other countries in Asia, we can look at page 19 where it shows the subscription source for the YouTube Ultraman official channel as of April 2022. Based on this data, more than half of the subscribers are from Asian countries excluding Japan. China is not listed because YouTube is banned over there. So, Ultraman is popular in Asia, but what does that have to do with Ultraman Trigger specifically? I think it simply has to do with Trigger being associated with Tiga, which is the most popular Ultraman series. In Japan, Tiga had the most votes in the 2022 Ultra Kaiju popularity poll as the fans' favorite Ultraman. Outside of Japan, I have seen many comments on YouTube, Reddit, and Twitter that state Tiga is the most popular as well. And so, I wouldn't be surprised if Trigger attracted a lot of attention from many people who loved Ultraman Tiga, which ultimately could have led to the increase in merchandise sales. On top of all of this, there is a possibility that Trigger led the viewers to other shows, namely Ultraman Z and Ultra Galaxy Fight. The reason I mention these two shows specifically is because the characters from these shows made an appearance in Ultraman Trigger. Ultraman Z was the mainline Ultraman show that came out a year prior to Ultraman Trigger. Ultra Galaxy Fight is an action drama series in which many Ultraman from various shows appear. During the run of Ultraman Trigger, the second series of Ultra Galaxy Fight, The Absolute Conspiracy, began airing. The villains of the Absolute Conspiracy, Absolute Tartarus and Absolute Diavolo, made an appearance in a 2-part episode in Trigger. By the way, I found Ultra Galaxy Fight to be interesting because one of the main characters of the show is Ultraman Reboot. Reboot is an Ultraman that first made an appearance in Malaysian CG animated show for kids, Upin and Ipin. Reboot makes an appearance in Ultraman Trigger during the fight against the Absolutians. And it was a joy watching him fight because his fighting style is based on Pencak Silat, which is a martial art that is widely practiced in Southeast Asia. Many Japanese fans seem to really like Ultraman Reboot because he has a personality of a very polite, serious, kind, and likable young man, which may seem cliche, but it's actually quite rare and refreshing to see in recent years. Anyways, I wouldn't be surprised if Ultraman Trigger also increased the revenue for Ultraman Z and Ultra Galaxy Fight by advertising them in the show. So far, I've been mentioning how successful Ultraman Trigger was and the reasons for it, but I've been ignoring the existence of a huge entity, Shin Ultraman. This movie was released on May 13th, 2021 and was massively successful. In Japan, a movie is considered a success if it grosses 1 billion yen. Shin Ultraman grossed over 4 billion yen in revenue a month and a half after its release. So yeah, super massively successful. Hearing this, you might be thinking, oh, then the massive success of the Ultraman franchise in 2021 is thanks to Shin Ultraman, not Ultraman Trigger. Well, my answer is thankfully no, and I have a reason to believe that. Merchandise sale. If we go back to looking at how much Bandai made from Ultraman toys within Japan, there was a 163% jump in revenue. No matter how successful Shin Ultraman is as a movie, it's just hard for me to believe that it increased the toy sales by that much. And I looked at the top 10 toy sale ranking for every month of 2021. 2 toys from Shin Ultraman, the soft vinyl for the kaijus Gabora and Neronga, ranked in for the month of February in the boys category. However, this toy sale is counted towards the data for 2020 to 2021, not for 2021 to 2022, which we're interested in. This is because data is counted from April and ends in next year's March. And so these 2 Shin Ultraman toys released in February 2021 are counted towards the data for April 2020 to March 2021. After this month, Shin Ultraman toys do not make any of the top 10 for the rest of 2021 and the first 3 months of 2022. As for Ultraman Trigger, the Sparklance, which is the transformation item used in the show, and its bundle made it into the top 10 in July 2021 for both comprehensive and boys category. Before we end the video, I wanted to state my opinions on Ultraman Trigger. Despite all the hate this show got, I really don't think it was that bad. Sure, the show wasn't all that interesting in terms of story, and any association with Tiga was implemented in a very awkward manner. But the fight scenes were great, and I also like slapstick humor for tokusatsu shows, which made the comical nature of Trigger enjoyable for me. I think what helped me to accept the show's comedy was knowing that Kouichi Sakamoto, who is the main director of Ultraman Trigger, stated in an interview that he wanted to make the show more uplifting because of how depressing the world was during the pandemic. When he directed Kamen Rider Forze back in 2011, he made a similar decision to make the show comical. This was because earlier in 2011, the Tohoku earthquake struck Japan, in which 19,759 people died, 2,553 people went missing, and 6,242 people were injured. At the end of the interview by Mantan regarding Ultraman Trigger, Sakamoto stated, quote, "With Forze, I had an intention to make a Kamen Rider that can lighten up the mood. This time, I want to make people smile. We can't see people smiling nowadays because everyone is wearing a mask." Of course, it's fine for viewers to dislike how comical the show was, but I think it'll be great if people knew that there was a really good reason for it. Anyways, going back to the show, my biggest gripe is how boring the main characters were because they don't have much of a motivation. On the other hand, Ignis, who is one of the side characters, was the only interesting character because even though he is generally a happy-go-lucky treasure hunter from outer space, he had a strong drive for revenge against Hudrum. There were many times that I really wished he was the main character. My favorite part of the show was the fact that he later gains the ability to transform into Trigger Dark, the evil version of the main hero. I also loved his retribution arc as he is freed from his inner darkness and ends up fighting alongside Ultraman Trigger. As for the villains, they're just okay, but I really liked that the show went for a story in which Chimera and Dargan had potential to become the good guys. By showing that even the Titans of Darkness can become good, it goes into Ultraman Tiga's main theme that hope exists in everyone. In that perspective, I believe that the show at its core inherited the spirit of Tiga. Anyways, that's it for today. If there's anything you would like to say about Ultraman Trigger, please let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope I'll see you next time.